Is NASA a trustworthy organization? NASA is one of many organizations riddled with a strange history that makes it nigh on impossible to trust. Unfortunately, many people are so enamored with NASA that they can't bear to question its motives. While I can't necessarily tell you why this organization is lying to the public, this video will demonstrate that NASA is most definitely untrustworthy. For decades, people have questioned whether NASA ever went to the moon. I'm certainly not saying this didn't happen, but it's basically impossible to conclusively disprove when NASA conveniently lost all the hard evidence that could be examined. For example, telemetry tapes with important scientific data and video footage have disappeared, such as footage of the famous first steps of Neil Armstrong on the surface of the moon when he spoke his famous words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." These tapes would take up entire rooms, and yet they can no longer be found anywhere. Some even claiming that due to a shortage of tapes in the 1980s, they were erased, so they could be reused for satellite imagery of the Earth. As the public, we're therefore expected to believe that some of the most important scientific evidence in history was erased due to a shortage of tapes. The equivalent of reusing the Mona Lisa because there was a shortage of canvas. The only possible explanation is that either this is one of the biggest examples of incompetence of all time, or NASA is hiding something from the public. It makes far more sense to conclude that an organization full of some of the brightest minds would never do something as stupid as erase such important evidence, indicating that NASA is most likely hiding something. The question we can't answer is, what are they hiding? As if this isn't strange enough, apparently we can't even go back to the moon anymore because the technology has been lost. None of this is remotely credible in the eyes of anyone with a semblance of critical thinking. It's suggested that because this technology is so old, and because the people behind the original space program no longer work for NASA, this somehow means we can't recreate this today. On that basis, this is why the telemetry tapes supposedly couldn't be used even if they were actually found. But someone with a slight amount of common sense can see that this is total nonsense. Having used cassettes in the 80s and 90s for music and videos, today no one uses them because they're out of date. So are we expected to believe that if someone opened up an old cassette player or VCR, that this dated technology would be beyond modern engineering? By the same token, are we expected to believe that NASA's older, less sophisticated technology couldn't be replicated with any degree of ease or accuracy, and that NASA didn't put contingency plans in place to continue to access or use old technology? Anyone that thinks this is remotely credible really needs to question their gullibility.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
It was all recorded on these telemetry tapes. So where is this hard evidence?
I haven't seen anything that indicates the telemetry data is even in existence, and as I said, even if we had it, we don't have the machines to play it back.
But your own research has shown the telemetry data is missing.
That's right.
This film you're making now, what is it? Does it have a name? I mean, do you have a name for it yet,
I think you're calling it "Did We Go?"
Did we go? Okay.
Doesn't have it either. The Smithsonian doesn't have it. Johnson doesn't have it.
Right. We've been unable to track it down. I mean, we don't know where this telemetry data ended up, and we don't know what path it may have taken. So Unfortunately, I'm afraid I can't really give you much of a clue as to where this data ended up and whether it still exists.
Once again, I reiterate that I'm not suggesting NASA didn't put men on the moon, and no, I'm not suggesting that the world is flat either, a theory that's definitely bolstered by NASA's flagrant dishonesty. What's very easy to prove when we look at NASA's history, however, is that this is an occult organisation which hides knowledge from the public for the benefit of initiated insiders. What this would indicate is that NASA has acquired information that it deliberately hides or occults from the masses. The best place to start when breaking this down is the origins of NASA. As part of the space race against the Soviet Union, NASA was formed in the early 1950s. What many people don't know is that Germans, some former Nazi members and leaders, assisted NASA with the development of its space program after they were moved to the US at the end of World War II. Likewise, the Soviet Union was also in a mad rush to acquire these Germans due to their expertise, with Operation Paperclip being the name for the US version of this program. Over 1,600 scientists, engineers and technicians were subsequently acquired in the US, with Wernher von Braun being one of the most well-known among them, pivotal in the development of NASA when his V-2 rocket team were employed by the US government. The question we should ask ourselves is why these Germans were so sought after, but the answer is not as conventional as many would have us believe. Yes, these Germans were extremely knowledgeable in a whole host of areas, partly due to the unethical experiments they carried out. But it's a little-known fact that Nazis dabbled extensively in occult science as well, and this is reflected in the influence they had on NASA. One example of this is Jack Parsons, who spoke for hours on the phone with Wernher von Braun about rocketry. After supposedly having a brief involvement with Marxism in 1939, Parsons converted to Aleister Crowley's religion of Thelema, although these aren't necessarily unconnected when you realise that Marxism stemmed from Satanism and the occult. Crowley became the spiritual mentor of Parsons, and at Crowley's bidding became the leader of the Californian Lodge for the Thelemite Ordo Templi Orientis. Parsons was one of the foremost rocket engineers in the whole of NASA's history, even nicknamed the father of rocket science. Others have stated that Parsons' influence on the 1960s countercultural movement was greater than Anton LaVey, founder of the Church of Satan. The fact that people draw connections like this tells us a great deal about not only NASA, but the 1960s countercultural movement. But it doesn't stop there. NASA has employed a whole swathe of very strange symbols that highlight its highly occult nature as an organisation. The NASA logo itself has what appears to be the tongue of a serpent extended behind it. Though this is easier to dismiss, there are numerous NASA mission patches that are far more difficult to innocently explain away. Some of the patches include dragons, a biblical symbol for Satan, and one must ask how dragons have anything at all to do with space exploration. A pyramid with an all-seeing eye can be found in other examples, the symbol of Illuminism linked to the Illuminati, Freemasonry, and Luciferianism. 3 serpents feature in another patch wrapped around the Earth, an obvious depiction of the tight hold on this planet by sinister forces, given that the serpent is a symbol of evil. Another patch has a creature resembling Moloch, the demon of child sacrifice in the Old Testament, with rockets on its lower body propelling it into space, alongside several 6s, the number associated with Satan. A phoenix rising from the flames appears in a different patch, an occult symbol that means order out of chaos, with devil you know written in Latin. A dark angel can be seen in yet another patch, with a sun shining behind it. This points to Lucifer, the fallen angel that became Satan, and once called the Light Bearer. One patch also has an alien face with the Latin phrase that basically means, "Let them hate so long as they fear," historically associated with the cruel Roman Emperor Caligula. I hope this video helps people realize that NASA is yet another example of a globalist organization with very questionable motives and history, especially when it pushes extremely dubious climate change alarmism that can only be solved by impoverishing the vast majority of humanity. This is Rocking Mystery, over and out.